who can't make it today. So here's kind of our game plan here. I've pulled some activities to review from the class content. We got some AJAX calls and handling their responses, dynamically creating elements, dynamically editing them, and then we're going to review the timesheet exercise. And if there's time remaining, definitely feel free to open up some topics. Feel free to ask questions the whole time as well. Alrighty, so we'll get started here. So this is the Giphy API activity. It's basic. It's just pre-coded basic to retrieve the AJAX response. So we've got our jQuery link here, and then here's our JavaScript. So we have our API key saved into a variable here, and then this is where we build up our query URL. So we have the base URL, which you can get from the docs. Like if you needed to figure this out, you could look at the docs for that. This is the endpoint right here trending. So if we wanted to do search, we could use that instead, like that. And then we have this API key equals, and we inject our API key into there. So that all works. So here's our AJAX call. This should all be pretty familiar. We pass in that URL method get we can ignore for now. And then this is how we can have access to the response from the API. So we label it response here. So let's look at this in the browser. That's on my other monitor. Here we go. All right, so we don't see anything, but it's here in the console. And here's our response object, and we can see that it returns us a data array with the bunch of objects in it. And then it's got some other stuff that we don't really care about. I mean, this can be useful for troubleshooting, but besides that, we can kind of ignore that. So uh, a useful shortcut can be, since we know we want response.data and nothing really else, we can actually make kind of a shortcut. So we'll go let data equal response.data. That way we don't have to keep specifying that. So right here, let's say we wanted to put these GIFs on the page. So when we look at the array here and we see all these objects, they're full of data. One of these is going to be actually a URL, and that's how we can grab that. All we need is a string really, and we can set a property to pull that from there. So let's capture that first. So we have an array, so we're probably gonna want to do it for each one. So we'll do a for loop. So let I equals 0, array.length, so we'll want data here, because that's our array. Then increment the counter by 1. All right, so this is gonna be where we're generating our content dynamically. So we'll need to make a div. We'll need to make an image. We're going to need to set the source for the image. And then we're going to need to put append image into div. And then append div onto page. Oh, so there's our pseudocode for that. So the way we can make a div in jQuery, so I like to use new div, because mind you, these get overwritten each time, so it's not necessarily important to make. So we make a new div like this. We just spell it out, div. So now our new div is held within that variable. So make an image, might as well just use that, img. We'll use that same syntax here again. There we go. All right. So now we're going to need to set attributes for this. So we can reference that image tag by its variable img. And then we could go attr And this is a method that we use to set attributes. And the way this method works is the first parameter is the attribute name, so in this case src, and the second parameter is the value to put in it. But how are we going to do that? So what we want to do is, so we'll go data at I. So that references the current object that we're looking at. And then here's where we actually need to look to see, we'll need to look at the response so that we know actually, here we are. So looks like we could find it in images. And let's use this 480W still, that seems fine. Now we'll use your URL here. So that's images.url. Cool. And you might even want to test, like, I'm not sure honestly if that'll go through, so we can do a console log of that and run this. Undefined. See, it's good that I did that. We'll use that 480. Ah, doesn't like that. Alright, that works. Because if I follow that, you can see it. Oh, wait. That's not quite right. Let's use fixed height. So it's images, fixed height, URL. There we go. You can see that that works. Cool, so we know that that's what we need right there. So we can actually get rid of this. Put that there. There we go. So as of this far, we've made a bunch of stuff and edited it, but we need to assemble it and put it on the page. So the way we'll do that is we want to put image into div, so we'll go div.append, and then pass in the image. And then here we'll do that again, except let's target something like bodyworks. Then pass in the div. Oh, actually we're naming it new div this whole time. There we go. See how it looks. Oh, that's okay. I'm gonna make a new div here for it. There we go. And then down here, I'll target it using the jQuery. It's an ID, oops, ID of target. There we are. There they go. And we can look at each one and see has a SRC attribute. We made that ourselves. Some of them take a little while to load, so that's why they have like the downsized versions, the still versions, stuff like that. Many times you might load up like a downsized still image, and then if they click on it, it'll animate, and that's actually what we'll be looking at on the next activity. So this is done. All right, so dynamic elements. So on this one, let's look how it looks in the browser first. So we have 3 buttons here, and when you click the buttons, it should do a should query the API Giphy, find a relevant picture, and make a bunch of divs for that. And so we already have all of our pseudocode here, which is good. So let's see. Yeah, so it's already set up. The query URL is already set up for us. So what it does is, so this is our button click handler, and when you click, it looks for the attribute data animal, and it pulls its value and it saves it in animal. So for example, doc. Then right here it goes, it stitches together the query URL with our search parameter, and it just, so Q equals whatever. There's our API key, and then it does our query. So here's our response. We console log that. We can see that here. And it should be the same structure as before, the data. That's what happens is when you work with an API, you kind of get, at first it's like, it's all this organization, but you get used to their organization because it's very API specific. So let's look at what we need to do. So for each result, so that's going to sound like a for loop, right? So let's set up our little shortcut here. There we go. So data.length. All right. I'll move this bracket down to the bottom because all this needs to happen within that loop. All right, so first step, make a div with jQuery and store it in a variable animal div. Easy enough. Then we use our new element syntax here. Done. Make a paragraph tag and store it within the variable name p. Oop. There we are. Set the inner text of the paragraph to the rating of the image in results at I. All right, so let's look at our API responses. So there should be a rating. So that's easy enough to get to. So data.rating. So what we're going to do is p.text. Open that up, and on the inside is what we want it to say. So we'll be able to do see data at I dot, I think it's rating. Yeah. Think. Sweet. Right, and then make an image tag. All right. Set the images source. So animal dot, we'll use it, the attr again. Fixed height URL. So the way we were able to get to that before was data at I dot images, and then fixed height URL. So now we'll start to assemble. So append the p into the animal div. Now animal image goes in, and you put these in the order you want them to appear. There we are. And finally, we put this whole packet of elements onto the page. So they have an ID right here, this div, that's our target. So we'll start a selector. And then pass in our animal div finally. Alright, let's see how it goes. Almost. Oh, I think I know already. Yeah, because I only put one parameter here. There we go. So this should be helpful on your homework, I believe. And you could also have it so that so the first thing that happens when they press the button, it could possibly clear out that animal div or that gifts appear here div. That could be a useful feature because as you could see, it wasn't really, it was probably growing at the bottom. So you could do .html, just make it an empty string. Let's see if that works. Yeah, see it replaces them now. Any questions about this one? Pretty much same as the last one. Cool. So now we are on this pausing GIFs exercise. So we have looks like four different images here. They have a default source, which is just a still image. That's the same as the data still attribute. Data animate, so this is going to be the animated version of the GIF. And then here's a data state attribute that we use to kind of toggle use it to toggle between the two in our conditional statements. So let's look at it in the browser. So you can see those, and they don't really do anything when we click. So we already have a click handler here for them. So first step, make a variable named state and store the data state in it. So let state equal, and then we're gonna have to do a selector here for this, so that this targets the button or the image that's been clicked. This.attr, and then we're gonna want data state, and it would be wise to check this immediately. Probably needs to be like that. It was looking for a variable named data state. All right, yeah, so it says still when we click them. Great, so check if the variable state is equal to still. Then update, if it is still, update it to animate. So let's do some conditional logic here. So if state is triple equal to the string still, then, and I'll move this up into there, then update the src attribute to its data animate value. So we're going to do, probably just use this again, dot attr src. So we're going to need to pull the data animate value. So we could, let's see. Maybe I'll use a variable to kind of capture that first. Cool. Then I'm going to want to test this. Oop. Ah, So we should see it say, yep, there's our link. So that works. So here we'll set the source to animate. There we go. Cool, so we have that logic set up. Let's see if it works. Ah, there it goes. So that's half the battle. So now we need to do our other option. So we'll use an else if state is triple equal to. Oh, that's why. Because right now we need to we actually need to swap that data state. So we'll do that here. This. And then we want data state. And then we need to switch it to animate. We'll use that. Great. So now we're going to check if it has been switched to animate. Then I'll move this comment there. So we're going to need to do the opposite still. And then we need to toggle that attribute. That way it'll reset to still. There we go. Play, pause, play, pause. Cool. So that kind of goes to show that you can kind of use properties to kind of cycle between conditional logic. You can hot swap kind of the CSS properties, the data attributes, all that. So that can be a useful skill. Great. All right, so now we have that timesheet exercise. This one was pretty hard. There was a lot to do, especially considering you had to build the front end. But for now, we'll start with the completed front end. So here's our main container, Jumbotron, that's just for that. A row to hold all this. Here's our current employees table. And it's got, we'll look at it in the browser. So it's got this, I put a default hard-coded line into here. But there's a category for each data, and then down here we have the form. So let's check this out in here. Here's our form. I'll collapse this. I like to collapse it. It can help a lot with legibility. So here's the input forms. Oops. So we have our ID for each one, and that's how we're going to pull the values out. All right, so let's jump over to the JavaScript. So steps to complete. Initialize Firebase. We'll do that first. Get started here. I'll start from scratch. Here we are. This takes a sec. All right, so this getting started page, you can press this add Firebase to your web app here, and it'll give you a already all figured out JavaScript here. So I'll paste that right here. And we don't need to put the Firebase link because we already have it here, just to enable the functionality of the database. All right, so here we've set up our config, we initialize the connection, and now we need to we need to be able to have a way of referencing it. So we'll do let database equal, I think it goes firebase dot database, and it's a function. I believe so. Yeah, I think it worked. All right, so here's our click handler. So we need to figure out the ID first. So we'll just look here at the form, and I have it as add. All right, so the first thing is to prevent the page refresh, because the default behavior for these submit buttons is to refresh the page, and we can prevent that with a little bit of code. So here's the event that goes in here, and this is optional, but if you want to use it, you just pass it in as whatever variable name you want. You often see it as e by itself. So we'll go e.prevent, then default. It's a function. Great. So when we hit that button, it won't refresh the page. All right, so now we grab our user input. And so if we look here, we have, they're all named very simply, name, role, start, rate. So here's how I would do this. So I would make an object, name it data, and then, because I know that we need to pass an object into the database, and so I might as well just do it all in one step here. So I could be like name, and then now this is where we're gonna do our pulling the data from the front end. So we actually have it just name. And then with these input boxes, the ones that are text, their value is equivalent to what's been typed inside of it. So we can easily pull it out with the .val, and we can trim it. Cool. So we'll do that again. I think it was name, role, start, rate. And I'm just gonna copy this and paste it. Sweet. And then the next thing I would do is log that out to make sure I'm pulling everything correctly before I try to do anything with it. All right, let's try it out. Ah, so it says trim of undefined. So that means that this was undefined. Let's do it without the trim for now. There we go. It's good enough. All right, so now that we know that works, get rid of this. This is actually what I just did in the same step, so we don't need that. All right, so now is where we're going to put it into the database. So we go database, ref, dot set, and then the object that we want to put in goes here. And we'll kind of see that it's working anyway, so we don't need these. but we will need to clear the text boxes. So we can actually do something similar here. From the, sorry, what? Yeah, and the form has, oh, nice. So I'll, nice. Let's test that out. Well, I had a different bug. Let's try to see if. Oh yeah, it might just be because of that default behavior that I was telling you about earlier. Might have been refreshing the page to make it appear that way. So the way these the .val function works is if you leave it blank, it'll return the value, but if you put anything in, it'll set the value. So there's that. So we can see that behavior here. And then, oop, well, most of them, ah, well, oh, it's a rate. There we go. So I'm gonna put this on one half of the screen here. Go to our database so we can see it update. It's the real-time one. Oh, and this is one other thing. So this is showing up because I just made this, but locked mode is, you know, it doesn't let anybody read and write. This is like a public mode. Um, you would never have it be public in a production app. All right, so here's it's empty right now. So let's try this. No, probably just did something wrong. Let's see. So if you ever get stuck on something that's very, very specific, you just don't remember it, it's, you know, always helpful to look, see how we did it before. So we'll use it like this, database.ref.push. And it doesn't need to be set up as an object because it already is. Let's see if that works. There it is. There's our database entry right here. It's got all of our key value pairs. Great, so there's that part's done. All right, so the next step is to listen for new entries and to update the HTML accordingly. So we have database.ref and then on, so it's listening for child added. And then here is our function to run every time. So store everything into a variable, and by that they mean each of the snapshot attributes. So we can go let name equal, and snapshot is how we're going to be referencing that child. which is a snapshot of the data in essence. So, and this can be named anything, mind you. So let name equals snapshot dot val. The dot val, gets the values out of it. Without it, you get kind of more of you get a bunch of like other data that you don't want. And then dot name. And then I would say that we should log it just to make sure that we're doing that step correctly. There he is, right there. And it's so when I update, it's looking, seeing what's in the database, and so it's bringing back name just fine. That works great. Um, as far as this like moment stuff goes, I'm really not going to get into it right now, but just um, this is just to format it into a better um, format. So date, I'll do formatted. It's a bit verbose, but it's fine. And then, so right here we're going to we need our other values. So let role equal, copy this. We did start. Oh, so we're trying to format the start date. I suppose we can actually take off the formatted because there's only one thing named date here. Cool. All right, so calculate the months. Again, it's not really what we're focusing on here, so I have code from before. So this might be something like worked. And it's looking for the difference between, I assume date. Doesn't work, we'll go back. Calculate the total build rate. This one's pretty straightforward, so we'll be like total. No, we'll name it build equal, and then it's just going to be so roll times rate. There we go. All right, so now we're starting to actually make our dynamic elements. So, and mind you, this is going to run for each entry in the database, so it's kind of like having it in a for loop. So it's kind of the same idea here where we're going to go let, I'll name this tr because it's table row. So let tr equal, make that jQuery. And you can look over here also and see, that's why I made the dummy data. Let's see, where's, no? Oh yeah, right here. So the T body is where it all goes within. So we got tr, and then their TDs, table data, or whatever you want to call it. So we make the tr. So now we need one for name, so we'll name it name equal, and we'll do our TD. And I'll copy this because all I really have to change is the variable name. So that was name, this is role. And this is start. Months. Rate and build. Oh, we made them, but we haven't given them any text. So we'll go, oops. I mean, and you can also kind of like chain them like this, where you could be like text. I mean, it's kind of a mess that way. But of course, that's all up to you. Name.text, and we can just pass in. Oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that because, so it'll be like name div. I already have variables named that. So or rather name div.text is name. Role. There we are. All right, so each of them have text inside of them. Got a bunch of that. So now we need to assemble all that. So we have tr is our like main container. So we'll do tr dot append, and then so first we're gonna want name div and so on. Let's try it. That's a very good idea. I don't know. Let's try it out. Because I know it's possible with like console log stuff like that. I'm not sure how it'll respond to having multiple parameters. There's a different error. Ah, oh, we want worked here. Hmm. Oh well, actually, because we didn't append the tr onto the table, so we'll do that here. I left this like this. Um, that's not really something I've seen before, but it's better. It's better in my opinion than like giving a an ID to tbody here. That would kind of be annoying. All right, so we'll append the tr and see what happens. Yeah, it does like that. Very good observation. That makes for a lot cleaner of code. So roll div, start div. We have, yeah, name, role, start, months. Create div and build div. So this line assembles them all into the tr, and then this line appends the tr onto the page. Ah, and we can see our it looks like I messed. Oh yeah, it's because I was entering non-numbers into those fields, and when it went to do the math, it got confused. But let's clear out our database and do like a final test of this. So you can clear it out by doing this. All right. So then when we refresh this, we just see that. All right. So I'll do this. Start date. We'll do it 05/01/18. And monthly rate. I don't know. There we are. looks like we did something wrong there, but anyway, the math in this instance isn't really important. The only point of that is that like you know that you have like the data in the database, and then you have like its representation and interpretation on the page. Like we don't we don't have the build in the database. We figure that out on the front end because it can change, and we don't need to store it because we have its parts, and that's something that you'll see a lot. Sometimes you don't need to store everything. All right, so 746. So does anybody have anything you want me to cover in specific? Questions? Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I wasn't gonna do it in this because I didn't want to confuse you guys, but let's refactor this for that. So we can actually just no, no, it's good. I like the for each. They're very neat. So this is how that works. So if I actually just type it like this, and it gives us our autofill. So array is what we want to target, so data in this case. And for each, and I'm going to refactor this to a syntax you're familiar with. So it's like, oh wait, sorry. Function, and then element goes in, that's the parameter. All right, so data for each. So what happens here is that it goes through it for each index, and down here, in the current index is represented as element. So in this case, we could say, like, what are we getting? We're getting back a bunch of GIFs. So GIF is what it'll be called. So let's see what we had down here. So we had, I'll paste it into there and we'll just refactor it that way. So make a new div, make an image. All right, so here's where we're gonna start targeting. So instead of data at I, because we're not messing around with index today, you just go GIF, because GIF is that representation of that object as the index of the array. So GIF.images, see how that works. Mm-hmm. And you can see that syntactically it's a bit more concise. Um, these are actually far preferable. So if you want to get into the habit of using these, it's definitely a good habit to be in. But if this causes you to be uncomfortable, just use the for loops. Cool. Anything else? Because if nobody has anything, I prepared a media query thing. Yeah, definitely. If you guys want to stick around for the media query, I know it's a bit behind from where we are, but it's a pretty short little thing. So, all right. So we have index, and this index is very simple. It's just a couple divs here, and then we have our style and assets with some images in it. So the images that I have, the small one is really small, medium is all right, the large one is extremely large. So here in the CSS, I've set it up to be mobile first, and that is a programming like doctrine that you should be familiar with. Um, Basically, you want the browser to load up the mobile version first, and if the screen is larger, then you know adjust to that, because you would rather have the lower power phones just having quick access to what they need, because bigger screens, bigger computers are much more capable. So all right, so when screen is below 720, and I have that written because this is the 720 breakpoint. So the default stylings here will be applied first, below 720. So let's look at how this looks. All right. So you can see that that's the default picture. I mean, it's not going to work very well on larger screens, obviously. It gets very blurry and pixelated. So let's fix that. So here in style I have, so this is for when it gets above 720 pixels. So what I'm going to do is this background URL attribute, I'm going to replace the main's background URL with, and it goes assets slash, and I have it named medium. There we are. Let's look at that. And right there. Breaks to a much larger picture. But you can see there's limitations to this picture as well. So we'll deal with that with the next breakpoint. And I'll just copy this and paste it there. Large. And so if you tried to load this large picture on like a phone, it would take forever. This is a 4K image. I can't even see it all really. I can change that, but it just goes to show how big this thing is. You don't want to have, like, for example, your portfolio site, if an employer brings it up on their phone and it like barely even loads, that might not be a good sign. There we go. So this can be useful. You would probably change some of the properties on the small one, but this can be useful. This will come in handy when you're doing your projects if you have like background images. Like something I like to do is actually do it right here. So we have main, wrapper, and target. So I'll do that. And I've taken Bootstrap off of this. So we could do, let's see, width. Set it to a percentage like 90. Oops. All right, so see how it's kind of coming in from the sides, and it's got the margin auto to center it. Then I might be like, give it a background, uh, you know, something. And you can kind of see how like you can kind of have like a nice background image in the sides, or this could even be something grayed out. Let's try that here. So we'll work in this big one. This is how I like to change my color, do colors, is I just type the hash and then 333 and it kind of brings up this menu here. So I'll keep that gray, but I'm going to bring down the opacity. So see how that's kind of, it kind of gives you, and you can mess with the opacity so that the content is more legible like this. But you can kind of still see the like hint of the background image behind it. I find that to be nice stylistically, and then as it breaks down, the picture would change. But when you get to the smallest ones, uh, you'll probably have your content across the whole viewport. And you can integrate this with Bootstrap really easily. Cool, so that is media queries. All right, 7:55. So if there's any last questions before we go,